Welcome to Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Charter is proud to be hosting a series of discussions with candidates for judge with the Los Angeles County Superior Court. In this November's election, there are 4 races that will be on the ballot after the primary, which was held in June. In this half hour, we'll be speaking with candidates for office number 158. The 2 candidates that advanced out of 5 to the general, Kim Nguyen and David Berger. We begin speaking with Kim Nguyen, who is listed on the ballot as a Deputy Attorney General, which means prosecutor for the state of California. Before we talk about your current position, I'd like to go back and hear about your background as a lawyer and otherwise. Tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Brad. Before I begin, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I think it's difficult for voters to get enough information about judicial candidates.
For sure.
And I think this is doing a great public service, so thank you.
Of course, thank you.
My background, I grew up here in the heart of Los Angeles, in the border of Echo Park in Chinatown. I went to Castellar Elementary School on Hill Street. Then my family and we moved to the San Gabriel Valley. I attended public schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, then went on to UCLA and then to Harvard Law School. After graduating from Harvard Law School, which was 16 years ago now, I've been an attorney for 16 years, I started my career at McCutcheon Doyle Brown and Anderson, which is a law firm where I had the opportunity to really learn the nuts and bolts of civil litigation.
After joining McCutcheon Doyle, you decided to go into the public sector. Our viewers know I used to be a lawyer, and after I graduated from law school, I worked for a judge for a year, a judicial clerkship. Your order was different.
Yes.
You went to a law firm, and then you worked for a judge as a judicial law clerk in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yes, yes. So after McCutcheon Doyle, I did have the opportunity for a clerkship on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. As you know, it's a coveted position.
Yeah, it is.
A prestigious one. The offer came to me. It was certainly something I could not turn down, even though I was really enjoying my work at McCutcheon Doyle. But it was an opportunity to not be missed, and I'm so glad I had that opportunity.
And after that, you went to one of the state's premier appellate law firms, Horvitz and Levy. So you went back to private practice. Then you left Horvitz and Levy, and you went to the Court of Appeals as an attorney, and then ultimately a Deputy Attorney General. Talk to us about your decision to get both private and public sector experience. It's actually unique amongst all the candidates that are on the ballot in November. I believe you're the only one of 8 that has private sector experience.
Yes. So in law school, I think a lot of law students are encouraged to go to private law firms,
which I did as well,
because the law school debt is so enormous. And that was something I entered, and I'm really glad I did, because I think in many ways working in the private sector gives you an opportunity to work on a variety of different cases, great training ground. But going back to public sector, when I clerked for the Ninth Circuit, which was my first foray into public service, I loved it. The work I did was interesting, but I was also part of a bigger picture. And I knew that every day when I came into work, if I did a good job, if I was conscientious, if I was diligent, if I produced something that was meaningful and worthwhile, that was part of a larger judicial system. And that was very rewarding and something I enjoyed very much. And in many ways, that motivated my desire to return to public service when I entered state service in 2008 as a senior appellate court attorney. And in working in the Court of Appeal, working with the justices of the Court of Appeal, working on drafting judicial opinions, advising them on a number of different appeals, I had the opportunity to immerse myself in civil law, which I already had a background in, but also criminal law, family law, juvenile dependency law. It was an incredible opportunity to really immerse myself in those areas of law.
And one could argue, because you are someone who has experience both in the private and public sector, you would come to the court with a certain perspective, whereas people who only worked as criminal prosecutors, let's say, would only have that single perspective. Is that fair?
I think it's a very fair point, and it's something I'm very proud of that I would bring to the bench. In addition to having both public and private sector experience, I do also have experience in the various different areas of the law. And I think one thing to keep in mind about the Superior Court, for voters out there and for anyone, is that they're not simply criminal trial courts.
Right.
They're not just civil courts. They're everything from probate to family to juvenile dependency and delinquency, writs and receivers, unlawful detainer. The Superior Court is the first layer of courts that impact issues in all of our lives.
And let me ask you, though, you are seeking a position on the trial court level. You have deep experience at the appellate level. So are you ready to really focus on that first level of justice as opposed to looking toward appellate work as a judge yourself?
It's an excellent question. I do have deep experience in appellate work. I also have deep experience in civil litigation in the Superior Court.
Trial level.
I am a Deputy Attorney General for the state of California. In my practice, I regularly appear in court. I've made numerous arguments before a court of law. I've examined witnesses under oath. And I should also mention that for the last few months, I've been serving as a temporary judge for the Superior Court. So I do think I am ready to take on this challenge. I think running a courtroom in the Superior Court requires all different types of experiences and attributes.
I want to ask about your Vietnamese heritage. You speak proudly of it.
Yes.
And if elected, I believe that you would be the only Vietnamese American on the Superior Court. Is that accurate?
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles?
Yes.
There have been others.
There's been one.
Just one.
The Honorable Jacqueline Nguyen. She was appointed to the Superior Court.
Okay.
And then elevated to the District Court and now sits on the Ninth Circuit.
I want to get a sense from you. Why do you believe that your heritage brings a veneer to the court in general that is positive?
I'm so glad you asked this question, Brad. I think a bench that reflects the community it serves, whether it be in terms of cultural heritage, gender, sexual identity, immigration background,
Sure.
all these different things. I think a bench that reflects the diversity of the community it serves, especially a community as diverse as Los Angeles County,
Right.
is a richer bench, a bench that's more able to address the needs of the people it serves. So I think diversity is an important thing on the bench. To answer your question, I am a Vietnamese American woman. I bring that experience to the bench. Is it the only way I could view cases? Certainly not. At the end of the day, a judge has to apply the law to the fact in a fair and impartial manner. That's absolutely the baseline. It's something that one does as a judge. But if I may finish.
Please.
But that being said, judges aren't robots, and we don't want them to be. We can't feed them a set of facts, push a function button, and expect the same result to come out each time. Judges bring their own experiences to the bench, their own lenses, their own backgrounds, so that they can better understand the people who appear before them.
And when we come back, we'll be speaking with the other candidate for the office, David Berger, and then we're going to bring both of you back and continue the conversation. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter Local Edition. Welcome back to Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We continue our conversation with one of the candidates for Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge, office number 158. His name is David Berger. He is a deputy district attorney ballot designation, violent crimes prosecutor. You have been working as a prosecutor for quite some time. Why has prosecution been your calling as a lawyer?
Well, first of all, Brad, thank you, and thank you, Charter Communications, for giving us candidates the opportunity to make ourselves known
We
to
appreciate
the
that.
voters who otherwise would know very little about us. And of course, the first thing that you've noticed from my accent is I'm not a native Los Angelino.
You are not.
And I'm not from the East Coast either.
You are not.
Hail from England, and part of the reason why I became a prosecutor, to actually answer your question, has to do with the way I was introduced to the law.
Please.
I studied law in England. I always wanted to be a barrister.
And a barrister in England means?
The person who puts on the robes and appears in court, whereas
it.
the solicitor is the person who sits behind the desk.
Got it.
But I never got to practice, and in the end I emigrated to the United States because my mother's family were from here. And I really wanted to be a trial attorney. So I had a law degree from the University of London. I went to Loyola Law School to get my JD.
You had to do both.
I didn't have to do the full degree, but I decided to do it because I had a really interesting program that focused on trial advocacy, which is my passion. And I ended up being part of a program that interfaced with the district attorney's office. You got credit for working at the district attorney's office. And my life plan was perhaps to do a little bit of trial work and then go into private practice. But as soon as I started working at the DA's office, even as a law clerk, I fell in love with the job.
Why?
Because there's an enormous sense of satisfaction in helping victims of crime and seeing that justice is done. Now, seeing that justice is done is an interesting concept because it doesn't always mean that you get a conviction. Sometimes it means there's an acquittal because that's what justice demands.
Let me ask you then, since you have spent your career as a prosecutor, you have been focused on the victims and trying to put away the bad guy. How will you, presuming victory, change the hat that you wear? Because you've been wearing the hat for so long, to make sure, like you said, sometimes acquittal's appropriate. And how will you as a judge be able to put on those new glasses?
You know, that's a very, very good question. And I think the easiest way for me to answer that is with two points. The first is, most of the people who are supporting my campaign are defense attorneys. The people I've worked with for 20 years at the DA's office who've seen how I understand how the system works out, the concept of our requirement that we prove the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt is one you have to apply, and I'm comfortable with applying it. And they've all said to me, well, to back up a little bit, back in 2014 there were a last round of elections, and a lot of attorneys came up to me and they said, you know, you'd make a great judge, why don't you run? So that's why, and they were predominantly people from the other side who don't seem to have any problem with the idea that I would not make a good judge because I'm prosecutorially biased.
Right.
I'm not.
Along those lines, when one is a judge, one needs to present in an independent, nonpartisan, non-controversial manner. You have been very active in the public conversation. You're known to write a blog. You got national attention based upon the launch of a drug-free zone in Lancaster. Are you ready to pull back a bit?
I think the bench is better when it has people who are independent. Now, I have bucked the trend in my capacity as a deputy district attorney in speaking out against things that are wrong, even if the office doesn't necessarily approve of that, which they don't, by the way. My activities are not approved of. They don't violate anything, but they're not approved of. And that's the sort of person you want as a judge. You don't want a judge who's going to toe the party line. You don't want a judge who's going to maintain status quo. You want a judge who is going to judge the facts presented in accordance with the rules of evidence fairly and decide the case based on the law not on cronyism.
But do you anticipate that you will continue the blog, continue to speak publicly? Again, you have a First Amendment right. I'm just, I think it's a fair question.
And it is a reasonable question. The answer is no, because the canons of judicial ethics would prevent me from doing that. So, the dragnet will have its last hurrah.
That's the name of the blog, by the way.
Fairly soon, hopefully. And it's a fair question, because people have said, well, if you're so outspoken, what kind of judge will you be? Well, I'll be the kind of judge that rules on the evidence that's presented to me, not the case that you want it to be.
I asked the other candidate for office about her background. She's of Vietnamese descent. And I wanted to get a sense from her as to how that informs her. You're of British descent. You spoke a little bit about your British background, but I really do want to get a sense. How does your background as a British subject, although I'm sure you're a citizen now because you're running for judge, but how does that inform you should you become a judge on the Los Angeles County Superior Court?
Well, bear in mind, I've got 20 years experience in the courtroom, trying cases, picking juries.
This is not a criticism, by the way. I'm just,
no,
I'm fascinated.
I'm answering your question in my own way. Doing the things that, that a judge has to rule on. And I've always tried to do that in a way that reflects my heritage, with a sense of propriety, with a sense of occasion. The blog stuff doesn't come into the court. No one has ever suggested that. I'm a different person in the court,
right?
Because I know what the occasion is in the court. It's a serious place where people have their livelihoods at stake, where people are coming to ask a judge to decide a case for them, and a judge has to set the right tone for the courtroom for that to occur.
Well, the accent helps. I can't deny it. The accent helps. But honestly, what does your British background, how does it inform you?
Probably the most influential person in my life as a lawyer is a man who's little known to the Americans, which is Lord Denning. He was the master of the rolls, a man who came from a fairly ordinary background, who rose to the highest position, and who established himself as the savior of the concept of equity in English law, equity meaning fairness. England had a system of law that was very rigid, very harsh, and yet Lord Denning managed to find ways to ameliorate rigid laws and ultimately do what is right and what is fair. And that's what I believe that the role of a judge should be, and that is the type of courtroom I would run, obviously within the boundaries permitted by the law.
When we come back, we're going to invite the other candidate for office, Kim Nguyen, to join us for a conversation between the two of us, or the three of us, I should say. I'm sure it will be lively but respectful. It is an interesting concept for individuals to run to be a judge, and we'll talk about that because I am interested to hear what both of you think about the concept of seeking voter approval to become a judge, when by definition the intent is that you are impartial, not biased. So we'll be back. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be speaking with Kim Nguyen and David Berger. They are candidates, Berger. They are candidates for a seat on the Los Angeles County Superior Court, Judge number 158. We'll be right back on Charter Local Edition. Welcome back to Charter Local Edition. We're joined now by both of the candidates that are seeking a position on the Los Angeles County Superior Court, office number 158. They advanced to the general election, which will be held in November. There were 5 candidates, 2 advanced. And I want to ask both candidates, we'll start with Kim Nguyen. You are running for office number 158. There were 7 judicial seats open. Why did you pick office number 158 to seek office? How does that work?
It's a good question.
Right.
So when I started this and I knew I wanted to run for judicial office, what was absolutely clear is I did not want to run against a sitting judge.
Okay.
So with that in mind, it was incumbent then to find a seat that was opening up. And by that I mean a judge who would be retiring during the end of his or her term. It was my understanding that in seat 158, Judge Eldon Fox was retiring, and I put my name into that seat. Now, I think the voters should know it's a county-wide seat.
Right.
Winning that seat doesn't necessarily put you back into the same courtroom or even the same courthouse. 158 is a way to understand the office.
What about you, sir? David, why did you pick office number 158?
Well, I had a very personal connection with Judge Fox. He was the first judge I'd ever appeared before when I became a deputy district attorney. And for the last 5 years, I've been working in his court every day, trying cases, settling cases, doing the work of the court. And when I heard that Judge Fox was thinking about retiring, I spoke to him, and I didn't have to ask him what did he think. He said, I hope you're going to run for my seat. And I have his endorsement, and that's why I'm running for this particular seat.
I want to talk about endorsements if we can, because in races like this, endorsements can matter a great deal. I believe David has the endorsements of some prior district attorneys as well as a sitting district attorney. But then there are questions about various organizations. David, the Metropolitan News has endorsed you, but the Los Angeles County Bar Association said gave you a not qualified.
Well, the Los Angeles County Bar Association isn't an association with any legal standing. It's a club. So their endorsement is not an endorsement, their rating is utterly irrelevant. What's
your sense? And I appreciate you saying that. What's your sense, Kim? You had received a well-qualified recommendation, but you don't have the endorsements of all the other folks that we just mentioned.
Well, I would like to respectfully disagree with Mr. Berger's characterization of the Los Angeles County Bar as a club. In fact, the panel of attorneys that undertook this evaluation comprised of 29 attorneys from all different disciplines within the legal community. The private sector, the public sector, criminal prosecutors, criminal defense attorneys, and civil litigators. They looked at the work history of each candidate and moreover contacted the attorneys that the candidate worked with, the attorneys the candidate opposed, and the judges that the candidate has appeared before. They took all that into account and then came up with a rating. I think it is an absolutely important rating, and it's one that I'm proud to say that I received a well-qualified
Well, I don't want to get
rating.
stuck into this because it's taking up time. But the reality is the Bar Association is simply a club. It was clearly a very flawed proceeding because they rated somebody who's never tried a case in her entire career as well qualified. They rated someone who has a criminal record as qualified. They rated just about everyone they possibly could as qualified. It was a very biased and ends-orientated process. Let's move on to another topic, please, Brad.
And I do want to, because it does beg the question. And the question is the concept of running to be a judge. There's something about it that feels, I don't know. You get appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Gubernatorial appointments are very common in California. So you had, I think, applied to be a judge, and the application was not granted ultimately. So talk to me about the whole concept of running to be a judge seeking voter approval. David?
Well, it's the only way you can get to become a judge if you are not going to get the governor's nod of approval. Governor Brown has historically not been in favor of appointing people from the district attorney's office. I mean, he does make a couple of appointments, to be fair to him, but the vast majority comply with his idea to have a more diverse bench. So if you're a deputy DA and you want to be a judge, the electoral process is really the only option available to you.
What do you make of running for judge? The fact that you are going to the voters to elect you, yet you really can't say a lot about your positions. That would not be appropriate. Whereas with every other position in which you seek elective approval, you tell them what your positions are.
Right. So one thing I do want to clarify, I did seek an appointment. My application is still pending.
Oh, it is? Okay,
They're
I
never
apologize.
denied.
I apologize.
They just move this way.
I apologize.
What do I think about the electoral process for judicial office? I love it, Brad.
Really?
I absolutely love it. I have had the opportunity to speak to so many voters throughout Los Angeles County who have very real ideas and opinions about our court system and access to our court system, access to court services. It's an incredible opportunity to speak to them. It's an incredible opportunity to understand the people that the court is supposed to serve. And I think, call me cheesy, but I love the democratic process.
Okay.
I love the idea of people deciding who should be a bench. Should the reappointments? Yes. Do I think it's great that we elect judges as well? Yes.
I want to ask about what should happen should you be victorious. Now, as I understand it, you join the court and then you're assigned to a division. Is that accurate?
Well, you get assigned wherever the Superior Court needs you.
Well, that's the
And
question.
at the moment, the course has been that you get into a misdemeanor trial court where you'll basically start off with those sorts of cases either at Hill Street or one of the other courts.
After a while, can you make a request of the chief judge in terms of what courtroom you would like to sit in and what types of cases you'd like to hear?
Well, I think ultimately they sort of tell you where you're going to go. You're bottom of the pecking order.
But I guess because the question I want to ask is, should you have the opportunity to make a request, be it on day 1 or day 1,000, what division, what area of cases would you like to hear most often?
I'd like to
Please
answer this. One court that I would definitely want to request is dependency court.
Okay.
And that's the court that takes jurisdiction over children who are abused and neglected, but also families who are on the brink of crisis, who are struggling to keep the family together, who need services as well. I think the work that dependency court judges do are absolutely critical to our community. It's good work, it's hard work, and it's something that if I had the opportunity to raise my hand for, I would certainly do that.
David.
Well, I think you certainly have to go through the trenches first
of
the trial court.
Yeah.
And as the only candidate who's got experience with trying cases in this race, I think I'm very well qualified for that. I will go wherever I can do what's best for the community. If that means transferring to civil, I'll do that. If that means going to family court, I'll do that. If it meant going to dependency court, I'll do that. But you can only get there when you've got the experience. And I think in this race, experience really counts over ideas.
I absolutely agree. And as someone who's been rated well qualified by the bar and who currently volunteers as a temporary judge and who has extensive litigation experience, I believe experience is critical.
I want to thank you both very much for joining us. The election will be held on November 8th. They are Kim Nguyen and David Berger. They are candidates for the Los Angeles County Superior Court, office number 158. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter Local.